Welcome to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. In this episode, we'll be listening to Leading the Way, Strategies for First-Time Managers in Bookstores, a session that was presented at Winter Institute 2025 in Denver, Colorado.
All right, everyone, it's 2:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today at Leading the Way. This is Strategies for First-Time Managers in Bookstores. We're going to start with the usual housekeeping stuff. Our slides and handouts are available in the app. Please fill out the session survey. It really is helpful. And this will be recorded. That means it's very important that if you raise your hand to speak, please speak into the microphone so that not only everyone in the room can hear it, but anyone watching the session later can also hear you. Another reminder to just silence your cell phones. And thanks again for joining us. We're going to go through the antitrust guidelines real fast. I'm sure you've all heard this a few times, but booksellers are encouraged to share ideas and support during the conference, but the Sherman Antitrust Act prohibits them from discussing the following: price or pricing policies, boycotts, dividing up the market. So thank you, Ingram, for sponsoring today's event and being such a valuable part of Winter Institute. And we're going to get started for real now. So the whole point of this session here is for those of you who have been promoted to become the manager of your bookstore. You're trying to figure out how to do that job. This is designed for first-time managers to help you transition from being a team member to a manager. Part of the point of today's session is so that we can leave you with actionable steps to improve communication, delegation, problem solving, and in general to empower and sustain your leadership journey and foster a supportive environment for your staff. So this is our agenda for today. We will all introduce ourselves. We're going to go through some terms and expectations for becoming a manager. We're also going to move on to talking about the importance of building community and relationships. We're going to talk about the importance of having boundaries in the workplace, some tips and tricks, some final thoughts, and then we're going to leave some time at the end for some Q&A. All right, so to begin, my name is Aileen McCormick. I work at Green Apple Books in San Francisco. Our store, we actually have 3 locations. My location has about 20 employees. We have another store that has about 8 to 10, another one with about 6 to 8. Our store has been open since 1967, but I've been the store manager since 2022. Before that, I was the assistant manager. And before that, I was our orders manager. So, okay.
I'm Kai. I'm from the Bookworm of Edwards in Edwards, Colorado. It's about 2 hours west of here. Our store is about 4,000 square feet. It has about 24 employees, if you consider our part-timers or full-timers, both cafe and bookside. And the store has been open for 27 years now. I've been there for almost 9. And I've been various types of manager. I'm currently the assistant manager of the store, but I've been the marketing manager, the floor manager, an events manager, a bunch of other stuff for about 7-ish years.
Yes. Hey everyone, my name is Naeen from Seminary Co-op Bookstores in Chicago. Our store has been around for over 60 years and we have a team of about 30 staff members across 2 locations. Both of our stores are right around the corner from each other, so that's really nice. I have been in bookstore management for over 4 years now, and I came into the industry as a manager.
Hi, I'm Amani. I work at the Ivy Bookshop in Baltimore, Maryland, and we have been open for 24-ish years, different location, and then we moved to the one we're at now. I've been working at the Ivy for 2 years now as the operations manager, but I also have worked as the inventory manager at a much smaller store, and I know we're all coming from stores with a lot of people, and I know that my old store had like 8 people between 2 stores, and sometimes management's a little different than that. So you can speak on that as well.
All right. So Kai is going to start us off with talking about some general management terms and expectations.
Yeah, so I think that one of the big things that comes with becoming a manager is more responsibility. Obviously, you manage people, but you also might be responsible for other day-to-day operations of the business, such as buying or receiving or any of those types of tasks. And one thing that I think our industry does very well is create jargon that doesn't make any sense if you don't know what it means. So these are a few that I think when I first became a manager and got buying responsibility, people just dropped casually in conversation. Like I should know what they mean automatically, and I definitely did not. So here's just a couple. Front list is everything that is forthcoming from a publisher, right? So things that aren't yet published that you're buying ahead of time. Backlist is everything that is already published that is still in print. Midlist does not have to do with the release date of the book, confusingly enough. Midlist is titles that a publisher is coming out with in the forthcoming season, but aren't expected to be the big splashy titles. They're called midlist because they're always smack dab in the middle of the catalog. So there's stuff that you still want to kind of be aware of, but they're not the ones that the publisher is necessarily going to put a bunch of money behind. And if you have any receiving responsibilities, one of the things you're going to come up against has many names, which is why it's so confusing. Laydown date, street smart date. That's the date that you are allowed to sell that book. So not every book in the entire industry has a laydown date, but a lot of them do, especially from the bigger publishers like the Big Five and that type of stuff. And those are the books that you can get in trouble for putting out early. So it's something that you need to be aware of. And it's your responsibility, if you have receiving responsibility, to make your staff aware of those as well, so those don't go out early.
And they do usually make that pretty clear. There'll be giant red stickers on the box or like a giant email with the warning. So that will be made very clear to you, and you should definitely be paying attention to that.
A few more. So direct ordering directly from the publisher. Imprints versus distributors is also, I think, important to know. A publishing house like Hachette has both imprints that they publish under different names. You know, PRH has Knopf, which is a PRH imprint. So it's still owned by PRH and they still publish. Distributor is things that the publisher does not publish directly, but they are responsible for shipping to you. So they may not even sell it to you, but they will come from that publisher. So like for Hachette, you know, it's Chronicle and Abrams and those types of things. Terms are really important to be aware of, especially if you do any inventory management. You know, what is the discount on certain things? What does a regular discount mean from Ingram? What does a net discount mean? Net means zero. You want to avoid those. Returnability, freight costs. Are you on net 30 terms with a publisher? Are you on net 60 terms with a publisher? Are you on net due with a publisher? You know, those types of things. Drop shipping is something that you do probably a lot from Ingram. If you do your ordering, so you probably already know how to do it, but that is what that's called when you ship a book directly from Ingram to a customer. And you are basically the facilitator, but you never actually handle the product. As a gift buyer, sidelines is a contentious term. That is what they are technically called. But sidelines are your non-book items. So your journals, your snacks, your stickers, your bracelets, your whatever you're doing that isn't book are your sidelines. They're also called gift items. B2B, business to business. That is what a lot of publishers have, what's called B2B accounts or B2B terms. And that's if you are basically saying this company or this group or this organization that I am working with needs 35 copies of this book. I don't need to touch it. Ingram doesn't have it. A lot of publishers will give you additional terms, you know, like 52% instead of 46 if you go to B2B or something, but it's usually a special account you have to set up. So if you're doing anything with coordinating that kind of relationship between you and another corporation and a publisher to source books for some kind of special event, that is probably something you're going to come up against as well.
Okay, so one thing to just tack on to what Kai just explained is that all of those terms are going to be in the handouts for this session. The ABA has made a very beautiful version of it. It looks really nice. And something that I think is important to remember is when they sent us the final version of that before this session, I was going through it with one of the other managers who's been a bookseller for over 10 years. And we were both still actively learning new things. So don't worry about knowing everything all the time. You're always going to be learning about that.
I learned the word midlist just now.
Happy to help.
So what I would like to talk about as what I think is a really important term for managers to have an understanding of is a code of conduct. This is something, if you were in the policy session the other day with Cindy from Changing Hands, she touched on this quite a bit. This is a way to set expectations for your staff about how they behave when they interact with each other, but also how what they are expected to put up with from a customer, what is appropriate for a customer behave, and what is crossing the line where you should ask them to leave. This code of conduct is going to take a different shape at every store. And even though if you have a small store, you might feel like, well, everyone gets along, that's fine. It is really helpful to have it in writing. That's something that prompts a discussion. And it is something that you might have to revise. Something that's hard in the job of being a manager is having difficult conversations with people about their behaviors. So to set the tone with a code of conduct of, this is how I expect you to behave when you are at work. This is how you should expect others to behave when they interact with you at work. And this is how we expect our customers to behave in our store. I think those are really important standards to set, and something that can be a conversation with your staff as you develop it and revise it.
Can I also add, I think for me, a lot of the times I have this unrealistic expectation that I don't need to say things because I'm like, of course they know to not do this or that. And I think we all know a lot of times our employees it might be their first job. So they might really have no basis on what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. So even though you think you might not need it, you do.
Yeah. And it's the kind of thing, if you have it written down, it's always there and you can refer back to it. But if it's something that you never talked about, it becomes a lot harder to enforce for someone's 100%. Behavior when you never set the expectation for it.
And as someone who now does HR management work for their store, it's really, really helpful to have a document to point back to, because the code of conduct is a contract between the business and the employee. So if you make the employee aware of these expectations and they violate them in some way or they don't meet them in some way, you can be like, hey, you agreed to this when we hired you. We had an orientation meeting. We went over this. These are the ways that you violated that. And so it gives you as a manager a store policy backup to back up what you're saying. And that way, I think it does also help that employee relationship, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But it's not like, I don't like what you did personally and I have a problem with it. It's that this is something that we agreed to and you agreed to it and we agreed to hold you to it and you violated it.
And I also think, code of conduct sounds like very official and can sound a little bit scary, but, I think that it's most helpful if you write this conduct and express it in these positive terms. We expect you to treat each other with respect. If you are in a situation where you don't feel like you can work with someone else, these are the steps for how to do that professionally. That's the kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be, I think it's better to use positive language in that as, these are the standards that we think you can uphold and that we think are important, as opposed to don't do this, don't do this. So we'll talk a little bit about some other words that first-time managers need to define for themselves in their role. I think that we all have a little bit to say about each of these. So did you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. Also, my approach to management is very hippy-dippy, whole person. So a lot of the things I say might not be as concrete or policy-focused as is necessary, but I just come at it from a little different angle. So, terms you need to define for yourself, what does manager mean to you? Does it just mean that you're the person who says, you were late 3 times this week and I have to take disciplinary action? Or does it mean that you're the person your staff knows, I'm having a hard time and I know that there's a person in power in my organization who is going to listen and be understanding for that? It's just about who you want to be to your staff, and what those boundaries are really determines that. Emotional boundaries, all kinds of boundaries. And for sustainability, I think sustainability and accountability kind of go hand in hand, because anything that you're asking your staff to do, if you're not consistent with it, the system doesn't hold up. Consistent with the policy and consistent around the board with how you explain it to people and what the expectation is. The code of conduct is one thing, but we also have what's called a best practices book. And that is for step-by-step guide to every task in the store. So we've got people who have worked at the store since the day it opened. We have people who are 6 months into working, but there is a standard way to do everything. The people who have been working in the store might have their little like ways around or tips or whatever, but there should be one standard way to do everything, and that's sustainable and consistent.
Yeah. Something that's important with like the word manager is that's going to mean something different at every store. And it's also going to mean something different, like even within your organization. I think that at some places, the manager like kind of totally runs the show. They'll do the payroll, the hiring, the et cetera, et cetera. At other places, it is a little bit less administrative and more about working like on the floor. Sometimes it has to do with behind the scenes, like operations and those kinds of things. So it's really important that that is something that is very clearly defined between yourself and your employer. What and who are you responsible for? And where do those responsibilities end and who picks up from there? Because it's going to be different in every job, even within your company. For me, sustainability was something that I really had to learn the hard way. Honestly, when I first became a manager, I didn't know how to turn it off. I had my email alerts on my phone. I would look at my email all the time. That was an unsustainable standard that had already been set at my company by certain people. And I was like, this doesn't work. I'm miserable and I'm not being helpful to my staff by doing this. So for me, sustainability means I no longer have my email alerts on. I have to actively check my email. When I'm not there, I don't even open it. I check in with my assistant manager over there and he checks in with me before our weekends. And we have those boundaries that are really, really important.
And I will say clarity and sustainability really do go hand in hand as well. I think as a new time manager, you need to be really clear with whoever the business owner is on what your role is and what the expectations are. Because a lot of the time, if it's just kind of like, well, I just say yes as things come up, that's not sustainable because things are going to keep coming up. And if you keep setting the expectation that you're saying yes and yes and yes, it's not going to go well and you're not going to have fun anymore. So definitely being really clear on what your role is, what your responsibilities are, is really important for that sustainability.
And I do think too, like that if your store is anything like mine, being a manager means having a closer relationship with the owner of the business because they do put a lot more trust and a lot more faith in you as an employee of their store. And so what's happened with myself and the owner of the business is sometimes he'll bring something up and I'll be like, I'm happy to talk to you about that. That is not currently something that is in my job. I'm happy to discuss taking that on if that's something you feel like you need extra help or backup with. But, we should explore that later, like not right here on the sales floor because you had the thought as you were walking past me. And I think that we'll talk a lot about boundary setting later too. And that's a boundary that you can set. But I think that does help. Like if the reason we word this as define for yourself, and we've been saying, check with your owner, check with these people, figure it out. But I think the reason that we decided to word it as defining it for yourself is the more firm and clear you can be with what you were hired to do, what you're willing to do, how much extra work you're willing to put in, because let's be real, we all work in books. There's a lot of extra duties as assigned kind of labor that comes up. But I think, how much extra time are you willing to put into certain aspects of your job every week, right? So like if some part of your job normally takes 10 hours, are you willing to put in 2 extra hours and sacrifice something else? Where does that boundary lie for you? And I think the clearer you can be with yourself, the clearer you can be with your staff, the clearer you can be with the owner, and the happier everyone in the situation is.
Yeah. And I know that if you're in a store of like 8 to 10 employees, boundaries are fake because everybody has to pitch in. There's 8 of you. But I think the boundary thing for me is work-life balance. My store owner, who is in the back, we're both kind of the type of people who get excited about an idea and we want to talk about it and we want to do it. And like, I can't believe we get to do this. This is so fun. But also I'm going to do it between the hours of 9 and 5 and I'm going to have fun with it between those hours. But when I go home, I'm not going to answer questions about it. But, it is up to the size of your store and how essential you are, even as a manager or just a bookseller, to every operation in the store.
Yeah. And I think that your boundary, your personal boundary, is going to be different than other managers in your store too.
Yeah, for sure.
I have a lot better now because I've been working on it, because personal growth always happens. A lot better, I think, or not better, stricter work-life boundaries than like the general manager of the store. And I'm like, I turn off my Slack notifications on the weekend. I don't need to know what's happening. If there's an emergency, someone will text me. Everyone in the store has my phone number. I don't need to know the day-to-day goings on. He's a firm believer that he wants to stay informed, right? And that is just a distinction that we have. Neither of us is right. That's a personal boundary that we've struck for ourselves. So, I think that there's a balance between what the store expects of you, what you expect of yourself, what other people expect of themselves, and those could be 3 separate things.
But they all need to be in communication with each other. The expectations you have for yourself, you need to be expressing those to the other people that you work with, and vice versa. And just to speak to versatility for a moment, your job description is not going to be stagnant. It's going to change as the store changes, as the world changes, as all of these things happen. So be ready to reevaluate what those are, whether it's because something in your personal life changed and you need to reevaluate what that work-life balance is, or if it is the structure of your store that's changed. Be ready to keep, like, you don't need to lock yourself into these definitions. I think it's very easy to give yourself your own box and try to keep that with some breathing room. Before you guys so it's also important to understand what the other people expect of you. You're defining things for yourself, but other people have expectations too. Does anyone want to jump in? Or?
At the bottom, when we're talking about administrative and scheduling, I will say one thing that I have committed to with my employees is making the schedule a month out. When I have worked part-time jobs and I'm waiting the week of for my schedule, I can't plan my life. And that would frustrate me. And so I tell everyone, if you call off a month in advance, I guarantee you can have it. But I'm going to make sure the schedule's up a month in advance. And once that schedule's up, it's up to you to figure out what to do with it. So that's one thing I like to be held accountable for, is giving you the space to plan your life.
Yeah, it's important to make sure that the role that you have, like I said before, with the versatility, is going to smoothly fit with the other parts of your store. And that's always going to be a work in progress. It is never going to be super straightforward or easy, and that's okay. You have to just be willing to work with everyone that's around you. Anymore.
I'll also say, I think if you are changing bookstores or something like that, just know that every bookstore owner has such different expectations of what they will want from you. I have been at a bookstore where, the expectation as general manager was, no, you do media interviews, you do post for social media things, and you become the face of the store itself. You're synonymous with the brand. So really thinking, is that something that you want or that you don't want? And then it might be different at a different store where it's actually no, you work behind the scenes, you are not the face of it. Because bookstore owners, this is their livelihood. This is their entire everything. So just keeping that in mind.
All right. So now we're going to move on. We're going to talk about the importance of building community and relationships, both before and after you become a manager. So your relationships with staff, if you're moving from a general staff role to a management role, they are going to change. And that is just effect. It is going to be different because you are now in two different roles in the environment in which you primarily interact. That does not mean that it has to be a negative change. There's ways to do that. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So, creating a community, finding mentors, getting to know the people who you are working with in the store, is deeply important. And attending things like this is going to be really important for that too. There's so many people that you can learn from that you are going to be interacting with. And something that we're really, really lucky to have as booksellers is that both on the publishing side and on the bookselling side, everyone wants to help each other, and we're all very excited to do so. And we are very, very fortunate to have this great community. And so don't be shy about tapping into that.
I think that, looking at relationships with your staff, I think is so important, and analyzing where your relationships exist currently and what are the possible stressor points that you stepping into this new role may have. I literally have mentioned this twice today. I have a coworker in the room, Kathleen, and I do a little funny physical gag where I physically remove my coworker hat and put on my manager hat when we have to switch conversation tones. And that's just a way of maintaining our friend relationship, because we play D&D together once a week and we have movie nights and we're friends, right? But when I'm hey, now I have to actually talk to you about something, as someone who is technically your supervisor in this moment, it's a physical, and it takes some pressure off, but it also just signifies you are a manager, yes, but that doesn't mean you have to stop being friends with your coworkers, or that inherently has to fall by the wayside, or that you have to be a manager all the time when you're at work. Because I think that one of the really great things about bookstores is that they are communities. They're communities for our customers. They're communities for us. And if I had to stop being friends with my coworkers, I would have no friends. So, I think that it's a balance, right? But you also need to make sure that your friends who are on the staff are respecting you in this new role. And if that for some reason is not being you're not seeing that, or you're feeling you're having trouble making that transition, that's where you can reach out to either another manager from another store that and how did you handle this, or talk to your owner, or talk to other managers. The general manager and I bounce difficult conversations off each other all the time about what's the best way to handle it, which one of us should have the conversation based on our relationship with the respective employee. And I think understanding how that'll work on the front end helps you plan for it more, and even if that's having a conversation with your friend and being I'm your manager now, these are the things that might have to change in our day-to-day working relationship when we're physically in the store. It might involve just an actual sit down, depending upon the closeness of your relationship.
Yeah. At our store, we've been around for a very long time, and there's a lot of different, friendships, married couples that have come out of the store. When I first became a manager, I was roommates that shared a bathroom with one of our employees. And, I think that those are relationships that you can keep and maintain and sustain, but you do have to figure out how to make that work. And the discussion of those types of boundaries is actually something that we include in our employee code of conduct, where it's when you're here, you are at work. And so those boundaries, you have to be conscious of those and the way that it affects everyone else around you too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also say on the flip side of it, I went into bookstore management just as a manager. So I often had booksellers that had been at the store longer than I had being kind of what do you know? And it's well, actually, I do know a lot, which is why I'm a manager here. So just also being really confident in your role, and don't let the imposter syndrome that might sneak in. You're there for a reason. You were chosen to be there, so just be really confident in your decisions and knowing that, that's it, actually.
Another important thing, building trust.
I think
very important.
Yeah, speaks to what you were just saying. I also came to my store as a manager. I'd worked at a different store, but the store I'm at now at the Ivy, I came in as the operations manager into a store that had been open for 22 years. And I didn't do anything to change anything for a while. I just observed how people were already doing things and asking if there was anything they wish was different. But I think making suggestions right away would have given off an energy that's like, I know better than you, even though I just got here. And I didn't. I didn't know how the Ivy did things. I knew technically what management in a bookstore looked like, but it's specific to every store that you're at. So take your time if you're going to a new store to learn the store before you make authoritative decisions.
I think one of the most important and sustainable ways to build trust is to make sure that you express to the people that you work with a level of respect.
Yes.
And I think that what Amani just described about learning how the Ivy worked before jumping in and implementing Amani's techniques, like that is really, really important. People will respond much more graciously to change if they feel like they are a part of it and that they are a valuable part of it. No one wants to feel like they've been doing something wrong. They want to feel like we can grow together.
And I will say that there was a few people who left. And I didn't really take that personally because part of the issue when I got there is that people were complaining about this culture of complaint and distrust and these feelings that they were having about each other. And there were some people who really wanted the change to happen. And there were some people, and that was their comfort zone. And if that was different, then this wasn't the job that they had been in. If they had to participate, if they had to be in a team zone and they couldn't just say, this is my thing, and that just wasn't sustainable to not have some connectivity in what everyone is doing. And that's okay that they left. It's not, I don't take it as like they hated me because I got here and now they don't want to be here. It's like the store owner had a vision of what she wants the store to be. I, as her manager, supported that and tried to create that environment. And people fit into that environment or they don't. And that's okay.
I just want to second that so strongly because I've also had that experience. And I think it's way more common than we talk about for these kinds of situations to occur. And yeah, you also keep in mind, you don't know what the management situation was like before you came in as a manager or unless you were elevated in the role, whatever. But oftentimes I have stepped into a role at a store and the booksellers are very trusting and they're also you don't know what happened before you got here. So just giving everyone that grace is also really, really important in building trust.
And I think where it says manage bookseller trust with owner trust, I think that's really important. And I think the main way that it showed up for me and continues to show up for me is that when booksellers bring an issue to you, if you feel like there is any capacity for any backlash on that bookseller, do not name them when you bring that to the owner. The owner expects you as a manager to keep them apprised of going on of things, make sure everything's running smoothly. And if there's something that needs to be brought to them, it needs to be brought to them. But if for some reason it is something that And even if it's not a capacity for backlash, even if you don't need to name that bookseller, don't name that bookseller because that you're maintaining trust with that bookseller as you being a person that they can confide in and come to when they have problems, and that it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change anything with you. It's not going to change anything with the ownership. So what I do a lot is I say, hey, I've heard from a couple booksellers about this happening, right? The owner doesn't need to know who they are. All they need to know is that there's an issue going on and you're bringing it to their attention and you're going to work on finding a solution for it together, right? So I think that balance of you being that in-between person, because for me, I tell my booksellers all the time that if something is happening, come to me. You can tell me anything, right? Yeah. It's fine. I would rather be an in-between between them and the owner and navigate that interpersonal dynamic than have resentment build because they feel like they don't have anyone to come to and complain, right? And I think that another important thing is I clarify a lot if a bookseller who's also one of my friends is complaining to me. I'm like, are you complaining to me as my friend or are you complaining to me as my employee? Right? And I think that's another important distinction to make is is this information that you just need to get out of your head and we're friends and you want to vent and then we can, grab a glass of wine later about it, whatever? Or is this information that you need me to take action on? I think that that's a very important part of that friend versus manager dynamic, is making that distinction. Because it can go both ways. It can be something that the employee's like, no, I don't want you to take action. I just need to bitch about it. And that's great. But if you escalate that and bring it to someone, you violated that trust, because that's not what they expected out of that conversation. And if it's something they want you to take action on and you don't escalate it and you don't bring it up to the owner, then you've also violated their trust because they feel like you've let them down. Right. So making that expectation clear in those kind of interactions, I think, is really crucial.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue into the ways that part of your role is there to support staff. One of the best ways to have a really great staff is to make your staff feel like they are respected and excited and supported at work. When they feel valued, respected, cared for, when they feel like they are taken seriously in their role, they're going to be a lot more willing to listen and give you that respect and time and care back, and to put that into their job. And that's not perfect. People aren't perfect, and you're going to make mistakes, and they're going to make mistakes, and you learn from that and you keep going. But this is something where if you can keep your staff, if you can keep their expectations that you are a work in progress, that everything is a work in progress, but you value what they do, it's going to be a lot easier to move forward and help them improve or help the store grow.
Yeah. The thing about the schedule, I look at my schedules like a puzzle, and I think about scheduling so hard. So I'm going to keep bringing it up. But my employees age range from like 18 to 76. And there are certain people who I don't have work together, and there are certain people who I always have work together. And on the weekend, I had a lot of high schoolers with availability on the weekend and not so many adults. And I, at first, was like giving the high schoolers those shifts. And then I was like, people come in for recommendations, and these kids have read YA books, which is fine. And those are great recommendations. But if there's nobody in the store who can recommend anything else, then what does that look like on the weekend? And so I had to rearrange, who is with who reads what, who are two people who are maybe very vocal, but maybe need to be with the person who's a little more shy, So try and think about what people are good at and how people work together also when you're making your schedule, not just filling in the time box.
Yeah, and staff at our store, at least, I feel like I can really see a very visible difference in their work and their demeanor and just the culture of the store for that period of time when I've said, hey, I've noticed that you are really good at X. Mm-hmm. I think that you could apply those skills to Y. Let's work together, and I'm going to give you, these parameters or this amount of autonomy. And when someone can feel proud about what they've worked on, they have a lot more agency, and that is how you're going to build a store that people want to be in, whether they're a customer or an employee.
Yeah, we have a kid who's worked at the store since he was 16, and he just turned 19. And we switched point of sale systems, and he was like, I could do the guide. Like, I could rewrite the best practices guide for this, like, if you want me to. Mm-hmm. And I was like, Greg, if you want to do that, do that.
Please rewrite the best practices guide.
Please rewrite it. And he like checks in with me, and he's like, I just want to be more than like the guy at the front desk. Like, and I'm like, sweet baby Greg, like, yes, like whatever, if you want to, like, I want to encourage that in you. I'm going to make a behind the scenes shift just for you so that you can come in and feel like you're important. And that's, you are, but you're also like 19, but you're important, to the fabric of what's going on here. And the more he does, the more we encourage him, the more things he's voluntarily doing. And he's like a kind of a shy kid, but he's coming out of his shell because we're like, Greg, that's so great that you did that. And he's like, can I do the next thing? I'm like, yes, hell yes.
So we did already touch quite a bit on the importance of boundaries, but we'll just go through a few more things in case anyone has any final thoughts on it. But one of the things about boundaries that I would like to bring up is that Sometimes it can be scary to enforce them. You can set a boundary with all the intentions that you have, and then life actually happens and you have to enforce it. And that doesn't always feel great. It can be pretty scary, especially when you're new to that. But it is going to be okay. I think that's important to remember. You might make mistakes in that process, but the boundaries that you are setting or that should be existing in your workplace are so that everyone can feel like they can show up to work and do their job. And sometimes you just have to let people ask you those difficult questions. And sometimes you're not going to have an answer in the moment. And you say, great question. Let me think about it, but it is like it says on the slide, you are going to have frank conversations, and you're going to have very difficult conversations. So make sure you're taking care of yourself in that. But if you can have those conversations, your job will get easier eventually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think advocating for yourself is huge. I think as a manager, you have to advocate for yourself basically as much as you advocate for your staff. You have to be able to hold people to boundaries that you've set. You have to know when someone is overstepping and taking advantage of you. And you have to be able to shut that down really fast, because you do not want that to become a pattern. It goes from both directions. If, the staff is taking advantage of you because of some reason, your previous relationship, or because they feel like, they can for some reason, even if it's not completely conscious and malicious, even if it's just like, well, I don't like closing and we were friends, so you shouldn't put me on closing shifts anymore, or something like that, right? Something like that. Or if the owner is putting more and more responsibility on you and you don't have the space, you're going to have to advocate for yourself. At the end of the day, it's up to you to know where your boundaries start and end. And maybe there's a little flex on either end for you, but there should be a hard stop at some point. And advocating for yourself is a skill, and it's really, really hard, and it's going to be really terrifying the first few times you have to do it, and you might go home and cry about it like I did. But it's the only way to avoid burning yourself out and becoming miserable. And I heard a quote on the Normal Gossip podcast, if any of you listen to that, that was like, bitterness is a pill you can't unswallow. Right. And as soon as you get to a point where you're bitter with how your job is going as a manager from whatever reason, you're never going to be happy again. And advocating for yourself and enforcing your own boundaries within your job is how you stay happy at the place that you're working.
And I'll say one thing as a very confrontational person. My boundaries for myself, I'm a very confrontational person. I'm going to have my boundaries. But also the boundaries that I have for customers interacting with my employees, I get very mama bear about it. And I think that is okay, because my employees feel like if something is happening to me and I go get Amani, it's not my problem anymore. And because I am who I am, I'm okay with that. If that's not who you are, decide that for yourself. But having the confidence to defend your staff, especially in a time like this, I think is really important. And our customer base is not always so kind to young people of color. And I've hired young people of color on purpose to put books in people's hands that they weren't going to pick up before. And I hired these people for a reason, and you're not about to scare them out of my store.
I think that's a really, really excellent point. And I think that there's also, there's different degrees of that too. You want to be there to be able to defend and support your staff when you have a hostile customer who's being racist, sexist, whatever. But there's even smaller scale things that will help build that relationship with your employees and with the customers. A customer comes in and they want to return something and it doesn't align with your return policy, and the employee tries to enforce that. The customer demands to speak with the manager. The employee is going to feel a lot more supported if you are also abiding by what that policy is. And if that policy doesn't work, then maybe it's time to revise what that policy is. But if my employee is being challenged by a customer because they are upholding one of our policies, if I come in and say, oh, no, it's okay, like you can do it anyway, they're not going to feel very good about that. And of course, not every situation is going to be easy with that. Even with the small stuff, people get nasty. But at the end of the day, your employees are the people that are going to be keeping your store open, because if they are happy, people are going to want to come into your store. And I just think that is incredibly important. Any more thoughts? Okay. Time for some like tips and tricks. And then we're going to get to some conclusion and Q&A. So the most important thing to remember as a first-time manager, in my opinion, is that you will make very many mistakes. You're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. You have to learn from your mistakes in order to grow. And so have forgiveness for yourself. It can be really, really hard, especially when it's like, I've made mistakes that felt very serious mistakes. And I had to learn from that and grow from that. And I won't make those mistakes again, but I don't think that I would be the manager I am now if I didn't make those mistakes, but also if I didn't have the other people in the community that I could talk these things through with. So don't be afraid of that. Did anyone else want to? Okay, cool. We've also just got some general tips. Get everything in writing. Having things in writing is so hugely important. I cannot emphasize it enough.
Everything.
Yeah, that goes from the really big things like your job description and what the owners, etc., expect from you, but also little things. If someone wants to change their schedule, if someone wants to have a day off, whatever it is, we can chat about it. I say, cool, I could probably make that work in April. I need you to put that in writing for me. If you don't put it in writing, like this conversation, we're talking about it, but this is not the end of it. I need to have it in writing so that I can refer back to it later. Or if I'm not here, if et cetera happens, I can pass this information along to someone else. Having things in writing will protect you, will protect your employees, and you can point to it. It's not based on the fallibility of memory and interpretation of a conversation. I'm not interested in the interpretation of the conversation that we had or your idea of how this exit interview went. I want it in writing.
Yeah, I think also don't be afraid to advocate for your own professional development. If you know you're lacking in an area, if you feel like your communication skills need a little work, or your people management needs a little work, or even if you're just interested in some aspect of leadership and management, and you want to grow in that area, don't be afraid to seek out professional development opportunities. You know, if there's someone you meet, and this can look like an official like book selling course of some kind, but it can also look like, hey, I've been talking to you at Winter Institute and you've been really helpful with your advice. Do you mind if we set up, a Zoom call at some point so we can continue this conversation? Or if I shoot you some emails with questions or something later, right? Don't be afraid to seek out those things to grow your own confidence as a manager, because if you're more confident in your management skills, like you're doing right now, congratulations, round of applause. But if you're more confident in your skills as a manager, your staff is going to be more confident in you, your owner's going to be more confident in you, and everyone's just going to have a better time.
And use the professional booksellers school courses. I did the inventory management course when I was at my old store, and what I learned was about more than just inventory. It was really about career bookselling. And if that is the path that you want to be on, that's a great resource. And I'm just so glad it exists. Mm-hmm. And there's people in my store, if they ask me like about career bookselling or, anything like that, I'm like, do you want me to sign you up for this class? Because then I can get you all these skills and then you can come do something that I don't want to do anymore. Yeah. And it's career building, it's a real book career. This is not just working at Target. Like there is a real thing about being a bookseller that I think is easier to understand when you do those professional development things.
Mm-hmm. And I'll also say, you don't have to have the answer for everything off the bat. I think that ties in really well to seeking out those professional development tools and classes. Just because you're the manager doesn't mean that you have to make every call yourself, or that you have to decide everything. Work with your owner, work with someone else that you've met through conferences or like the industry at large and say, what would you suggest doing here? Or let's talk this out because I don't want to make the wrong call. And you will make the wrong call sometimes, but there's also an opportunity to, engage with others and think through decisions.
Yeah. So I want to leave some time for Q&A. So the last things that we're going to do is we've each come prepared with some actionable thing that you can do after you leave this session to help move yourself forward. Before we get to that, I just wanted to also say that this is what this gorgeous glossary of bookselling looks like. Please, no matter what stage you are of a bookseller, I think you'll learn something. And I think that at your store, there's going to be a lot of additional things. The notes that I sent here, I had like deleted half of it because I was like, these are such Green Apple specific terms. Like no one needs to know what the cave is here, but if you work for my store, you do. So I just want to make sure that everyone's hard work gets acknowledged here. My actionable item is to look up what the local laws are in your city or state and also at the federal level you can just start with the most basic things. What records do you legally need to keep? That is a really big one and a hard lesson that I had to learn at some point. I want to shout out Cindy from Changing Hands. She did the policy education session a few days ago and is an absolutely fabulous resource. And there's a ton of her stuff and similar stuff in the ABA resource library and in the slides from that session. She, I believe, is getting an advanced degree in employment, HR, stuff. So she is not only has implemented these things at her store and is very knowledgeable about that, but has been educated about it and is very good at educating others about it. So reach out to Cindy or look at the slides from her.
I think my action item is to compare your job descriptions. Look at your old job description versus your new job description. Figure out what are the major growth/challenge points potentially going to be for you. What responsibility did you used to have that's no longer part of your responsibility? And who has that now? If your stores are anything like mine and instead of new job descriptions, you just get something added onto your old job description, are there some things that you can negotiate with your owner that this doesn't really fit with what I'm doing anymore? Is there someone else we can give this to? And really kind of look at it in a critical way like that so you can make sure that you're setting yourself up for success and you know all the expectations, but you also make sure that you're not getting overwhelmed by things just being added.
My action item is to find a bookstore near you or somewhere that has a similar structure to yours. So if it's the same size team, square footage, whatever it may be, same values, mission orientation, and connect with their manager. And just having community has kept me sane in many, many instances that otherwise would have broken me. So definitely reach out and also consider sales reps as well, please. They have been my heroes in so many really, really tough times where they have so much knowledge of the industry and they can answer a lot of the silly questions that I have a lot of the time. Like when I didn't know what net meant, asking them is a great resource.
I would say look at your staff meetings and why you have them and when you have them and what you talk about. I think the way ours were going, people were dreading going to them. And now I do prizes at the end of the staff meeting. One time we had a gift wrapping competition right before the holidays. People want to have fun. There's still things that we talk about, but I think rethinking them has made some sense of camaraderie with people who don't normally work the same shifts, some kind of connection in that way. And also your schedule, because there's always something interesting you can do with your schedule. I just altered mine so that front desk and info ships overlap, because we kept finding stacks of things with sticky notes on them because the person at the front desk left and then the next person came 2 minutes later and was like, what is this? But now there's 15 minutes where they talk to each other. Hey, I put this stack of books right here. It changed so much, that 15 minutes. So just think about that stuff.
Yeah. So please make sure that you fill out the session survey, but I want to open the floor for some Q&A. So reminder, please speak into the microphone, and we'll start over here.
Hi, I am a first-time manager, and I am my store's first manager.
Wow.
I have also been with the owner since before they opened their brick and mortar as a buyer. So my role has changed several times since then. And there are a lot of things that are not built out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if that is my role, but I'm wondering what advice you would have when there is no precedent. The job description is a little shaky.
Rewrite it.
Yeah, rewrite it yourself.
Yeah.
I think you can negotiate with your owner, but I 100% agree. Like, just say, write something out and say, this is my understanding of my job. This is my understanding of where these end. Do you agree with this? Is this something that we can sign off on and make official?
And, present everything as a draft.
Mm-hmm.
What you start with doesn't need to be where you end, but that sounds like an overwhelming thing, right? I have to build everything out. It's the first of everything. And you just start, like they said, with writing your job description. Write 6 sentences, look back at it the next day, think about what you did the day before. What else do you need to add? And then, have you ever used the resource library from the ABA? For everyone else in the room, if you have or haven't, it's awesome. There's so much stuff from years and years of booksellers that have contributed to it. And there's going to be a lot of templates and a lot of things. And again, just because you start there doesn't mean that's where you'll end up. But it's less intimidating to look at a template than it is to look at a blank page.
My role is a little bit unique in that we have 3 locations that are like miniature bookstores and cafes. And then we have one large bookstore that's also a cafe and basically restaurant for breakfast and lunch. And I am a GM for the 3 little ones, but I have not been the buyer. But my role is sort of changing into that. And my question is, for someone who's new, but I have the love of books, I have everything, and I am not new to the company. How do you deal with book buyers who've been there too long and have lost their luster, or who only order, like, we have plans, but what they like?
That's who left when I started changing things.
That's good to know.
A similar experience too.
And so that's sort of why I'm here now, is because of that. And we have to make books more a priority.
Yeah.
I mean, we started, the big bookstore just as a bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
But because I feel like the buying has suffered, we're more of a cafe now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was curious about. Like,
stick to what the goal is or the mission that the store owner or you have, and stick to it hard. And if the new buyers the buyers who have been there don't want to fit into what the mission of the store is,
they gotta go.
That's just what it is. There's a set thing of what it is. So,
and you don't have to do that alone. This is where making relationships with your sales reps.
Yeah,
that is where you're going to have help with that. Oh, go ahead.
So when you guys were talking about the reps, I was like, oh, good. My instinct's right. We don't have a lot of rep relationships because we do so much through Ingram and I know. And I was like, the one note I took from here, every conference, I'm like, I'm collecting every rep's card.
Yes.
And that is my strength, right? These relationships. And so good. Yeah. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. And I think if you need, I don't know how the owner of your store is in terms of pursuing reps. Okay, great. So I think having a conversation, but I think honestly, your rep is your ally as a manager. They're your ally as a financier. They're your ally as a budgeter. They're your ally as a shopper. They're your ally for a lot of things. And I think, it's a financial boon to go directly through the publishers a lot of the time.
Yeah,
they have better discounts. You know, traveling reps are great, Zoom reps are great, phone reps are great. You know, and I think there's so many benefits to it. I also think that every single buyer for a store has their own personality and puts their own imprint on the store. Yeah. And so kind of to echo what's already been said, you know, I think if it's the time for the fingerprint on the store to change, then it's the time for it to change.
And also, you don't have to be the one to have those conversations. That is 100% the responsibility of the owner to enforce that.
Too. But she's great.
Yeah.
And we only have... we'll do those last two, but just in case you have to go to do other things, I just want to point out on the board, we have our contact information. So please reach out. And if you want to chat afterwards, I will be here. So go ahead.
My question is about staff meetings. My manager is about to go on a maternity leave and I'm going to kind of take over. We've never done staff meetings. And I've always wanted to, but it's not something she's really made a priority just because it takes a lot of effort to get our part-time staff and our full-time staff. We're all on such different schedules. So I wanted to ask, how do you guys run your staff meetings? Do you pay your staff? Do you come in before, after work, that kind of thing? And how have you made it so it's something that's consistent? Because we get one like once every couple of years.
So we have a lot of part-time booksellers on my team as well. And I've accepted that if whatever messaging I need to get across, it needs to be me saying it. So it needs to be the same person having the meetings. If you're going to have multiple, to make sure that everyone is hearing the same thing, we do compensate. I will have a couple of different slots available that the team can then sign up for. So like a morning slot, an evening slot. And then I am saying the same exact thing over and over again. You just want to make sure that you are being consistent in whatever topics you're addressing. I know with my team, they have a group chat that they love throwing things in, on their end. And if there is any deviation, I'm going to hear about it. So I've just accepted that it has to be me and it has to be consistent. And
Real quick, we do ours the second Wednesday every other month at 9 a.m. before the store opens at 10. There are people who don't come every time because they're part-time, but we make an agenda and I send it to the people who didn't come. And if they have questions about parts on the agenda, then we talk about them. But yeah, we have a cafe, so we bring pastries and coffee. At the beginning of the meeting, we start off with like a fun intro question, like, what's the name of the hospital you were born in? And then I do 3, it's like if we've implemented we just did the new POS. So I might say like, what's the name of the button that takes you to the custom Excel report? And whoever gets that right gets like the random junk that I got off of Quill, a friend's puzzle, a baseball mitt, chip dip plate, just stuff like that. It makes it fun.
Yeah, we do. I'm working to make them more consistent. Theoretically, they are on the 3rd Sunday of every month. And it is after we close. So our store hours on the weekend are 9 to 5. Our staff meeting starts at 6. So the store is totally closed. Everyone's responsibilities are done. And we try and keep it to an hour and a half tops. They are mandatory. Everyone on staff is expected to attend. I take attendance at the beginning of every meeting. And if people don't show up, I follow up. And that they are paid. But that is just a company culture expectation that because we have a larger staff, it's one of the few times we're all sitting in a room together, both the cafe staff and the Bookside staff together. It's also our chance to kind of circle up. The other thing we're starting soon is manager meetings, which is going to be, I think, before the general staff meeting. But for like 30 minutes, it doesn't have to be as long, but it's a time for the store managers to all get in a room together and be like, what's going on? What's the problem? What are we having? Because we're having a management communication issue between a few different places. So that's something that we're going to start implementing. So yeah, don't be afraid to be a little creative. And if it's once a quarter, if it's once a month, if it's whatever. I know a store that has a weekly staff meeting, which seems crazy to me. But whatever works for your store is what works.
And I just want to make sure we get our last question in here.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Richard. I'm from Napa Book Mine in Napa, California. This is my first Winter Institute, and I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much. I've really learned a lot. My background is from management, customer service, and book the book industry is new to me. But one of the things I've learned over the years for myself is that when I see the term manager, I've learned that I've had managers that are very good at leadership. Mm-hmm. I mean, I will follow them up the top of the mountain, or him or her, or they. I've had managers who were very good administrators. Boy, they could keep a time schedule. They could tell you all about the personnel things. And then I've had managers who were very good communicators, very good interpersonal skills. And I've had managers who have failed at different. So what I've taken is I've tried to be honest with myself and say, okay, where do I need to work on? Where do I need to gain? Where can I do? So it's not easy being a manager.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
One of the things we do at our store and our management structure is maybe a little bit unusual, but we have, and this is like unofficial, but it's the way that it's played out over the past however many years, is that we have people who manage people, and then we have people who manage the books and stuff. So there's people who can't always cross into both of those. There are people who can, but like, to be honest, like you were saying about like, where you fall on that spectrum is going to be very beneficial to you.
And I also do firmly believe that all of those skills can be taught and all of those skills can be learned. You can learn how to communicate effectively. You can learn how to be a better project administrator. You know, like you can learn these things. So I think being honest with yourself about where your current strengths are and playing into those and knowing how to utilize those, and also fully knowing where you're weakest. And really considering, like, is this something that I need to learn how to do in this new role, and taking the steps to learn how to do that.
Yeah, I'll just say our structure is there's the operations manager, me, and there's an events manager. And I'm really good at communicating with people in the store. People outside of the store, like, I don't want to talk. Like, I don't want to talk to authors. I don't want to talk to public. Like, oh my gosh, the emails. Like, I just can't. But because I have somebody who's the events manager who does that stuff, and I don't, I have a lot more energy and thought to go into what I actually do on my side. Because if I was trying to answer those emails, it wouldn't work. It would be bad for everyone.
I would set my computer on fire.
Yeah.
Again, just those boundaries. If you take away anything, it's boundaries.
Boundaries.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in the session. Please remember to rate the session and enjoy the last few hours of Winter Institute.
Thank you for listening to Booked, the bookstore education podcast brought to you by the American Booksellers Association. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app. Additional educational resources can always be found on the ABA site at www.bookweb.org. Happy reading!